Morning everyone, wishing you all the best and just taking this opportunity to discuss another way that we can support our students with their literacy. So I decided that I would start with this lovely quote and beautiful picture, just to hopefully get you thinking about the ways in which having a broad vocabulary, having some mastery of English helps us when we're expressing ourselves. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I went to live in France for a little bit, and although I could understand most of what people were saying, putting sentences together was a lot more of a challenge. And I heard a lady saying, "Oh, she's a really quiet girl," and I wanted to say, "I'm not that quiet. It's just I can't really speak very well," and it felt quite difficult to be described as something I wouldn't really see myself as. And as you'll be well aware, there's many times in life we have to write letters to argue points of view. Applications, we have to do so much reading. When we read outside our comfort zone, I think it really brings home to us the challenges that students face in our lessons. So one of the ways that I've spoken to you about addressing new words or reinforcing language in the classroom or for homework is using this Freyr diagram. Just wanted to remind you about that it's in the students' planners. So if you want to set anything at this time, hopefully the majority of them have got that at home, or obviously you can send them it for homework. Feel free to adapt the subtitles of the diagram in a way that suits you. This is one that might be more suited to science with its facts and examples and non-examples. I think having a definition is always vital. In other subjects, you might prefer to replace one of the subtitles with an image, with synonyms. There's all sorts of different ways you can adapt it as you see fit. So what I want to do is think a little bit more about closing the vocabulary gap and different ideas that we could encourage students to take up, and really to encourage a love of language in our subjects and obviously knowledge of language too. Often in my lessons, and I'm sure a lot of you do the same in yours, I'll notice a word and come and write it on the board and break it down and try to make connections to the words that I'm looking at, either with the outside world, perhaps with songs, and where I'm aware of a word being used in a different subject context, I'll use it. Sometimes when I'm doing that, I think there's a connection with part of the word, and then as we look at it, I find there isn't, but I don't think there's a problem with that. It's just a way of modelling thought, and if it doesn't work out, it's just showing students that actually sometimes those connections don't work out, and it can be useful, I think. In a previous CPD session, I talked a bit about cognitive load. To put it simply, when we're planning work, and particularly I'm thinking about the reading students have to do, we're thinking about the things that are going to put a strain on students' brains. We're thinking about the knowledge that they already have, which is stored in their long-term memory. It's knowledge that they know well, connections we can make, and how we can look at combining these to help them to achieve success, to really ease that load so they don't feel overwhelmed. So I just wondered if you could recall any of the strategies that we've talked about before that ease the load that students face when reading in lessons. So these are just some of the ones that we have talked about. So really, if you can, to look at the text, walking in the shoes of your students, thinking about the things that you as an expert reader probably won't notice, but that they might find really difficult. And really thinking about how much you've got on the page and whether it's going to become a bit overwhelming by the end. Dawn spoke in her excellent CPD about SEN the year before last and last year, so I'm losing track of time, about some of the ways that we can support students, for example by using larger font and visuals, and then thinking about perhaps chunking the text up in particular ways or presenting it in different ways, which are also ways of approaching text that Dawn has talked about, as have I. And then really sort of pre-reading for homework. Perhaps this is something that students can do while they're at home, getting them to think about vocabulary before they encounter the text so that there's not so much of that stress placed on their brains when they're reading. So it's really, again, to try to put ourselves in the position of the students. I showed you this Edinburgh reading rope in the CPD, which seems a long time ago now. I think it's useful to come back to this to remind ourselves about how complex reading is. In orange, we've got the word recognition subheadings. These skills are ones that students really pick up when they first learn to read and during primary school. But just remembering that there are students in our school who still are struggling with these basics. And then the language comprehension skills at the beginning, which are so complex, and all of these strands coming together to enable people to read. One researcher compared reading to being as complex a task as playing a game of chess, because there's so many different moves and things going on. And just a reminder about working memory linking to cognitive load, that we must be careful not to overload people, and thinking about building vocabulary, ways that we can ease reading is going to release more energy in people's working memory. Also, I talked about the fact that students will be working in some subjects where they feel more comfortable than others, that in primary school they were with probably one teacher in one classroom and they mainly encountered fiction books, but once they go to secondary they're moving from classroom to classroom with different vocabulary pressures and reading pressures as they go from lesson to lesson. So I just wanted to show you a couple of examples of text to encourage you to think about the reading challenges. There wasn't the slightest breeze to cool the skin or make even a baby finger crease on the surface of the sea. The Louisa May floated like a toy sitting on a glass table. And I've immediately noticed that when I typed this up, I forgot the capital letter. So this is actually an extract from a story in a SATS reading paper, and it's fiction. So as human beings, we're used to stories, we love stories, we're brought up with stories. At primary school, most of students' reading comes via fiction, certainly a huge proportion of it compared to the proportion of non-fiction text they face in secondary school. And we might think this is quite easy to read, but actually it is still very challenging because it relies on the fact that you can visualize the text. It relies on the fact that you know, particularly if your teacher has used capitals correctly, that the Louisa May is the name, the proper noun of a boat. And if you don't know that, you're going to become confused. And then you're also dealing with similes and metaphors as well. So it seems to us quite easy, but not to students necessarily. And then the second text from my son's pocket-sized revision guide to PE. Some mind-blowing vocabulary in here, particularly for me, as not a scientific type of person. So skeletal muscle fibres, type 1. Type 1 have a slow contraction velocity, are very resistant to fatigue, and are capable of repeated low-level contractions by producing large amounts of ATP through oxidative metabolic processes. And I don't even know if I've pronounced the oxidative, I don't know whether it's oxidative, but never mind. It's plain, I would think, for most people to see how much complex vocabulary there is in here, what a complex sentence it is. We've got hyphenated words, we've got abbreviations. When you're presenting these sorts of text to students, you really need to think about what you can do to help them to access that vocabulary. And the big thing really is stopping the shutters coming down. That's what I often think about when I can't do things. It just seems like my brain closes off and says, I've had enough. And the more we can think about how to help ease that load, the more we will hopefully prevent students feeling like this and switching off. So what I wanted to talk about, and I'll try to speed up a bit now, is breaking language down. As I said, taking words, perhaps to give for homework, to put on the whiteboard, and just helping students to break them down. So here we have a little morph. Smallest unit of language is a morpheme, and morphology is the way that words are grouped together. So on the board, or however we want to do it, we can model breaking down words and working out connections between them. So I'm just going to look now at the word simile, which obviously is a common word encountered in English lessons. And I'd originally tried to get students thinking about connections, like the word similar. And I break this word down into two morphemes. That's what it's got. And there's the second one. I don't think the second one is as important, and as long as you're looking at some key part of the word for students to make connections with, that's the most important thing to do. The thing about English is it's a mongrel language, and that's because it's been influenced by so many invaders and by the fact that we've gone off and invaded lots of other countries and stolen from them. And obviously every day new words are coming into language. So it's a challenge, but it's also very rich and something to be celebrated. I think, although there's a debate about it, it's one of the most word-rich languages in the whole world, with more synonyms than any other language. The thing that you can do to hopefully interest students even more in words is get them thinking about where do they think words come from. Sometimes there are certain sounds of words that seem to connect them. I've done this with my A-level group, and sometimes we decide that something's definitely of French origin, and then we actually find out it's a Germanic word. So again, it doesn't work all the time, but you're just getting students thinking. So I've just chosen a couple of examples here to show what you can find if you look them up online. I've recommended some places to do this at the end of this talk. So here we've got transform, split into two morphemes. In red, I've highlighted the meaning, and in green, I've highlighted the etymology, where these words come from. As I say, I'm a bit of a word bore, so feel free to enjoy that or pass over depending on your particular taste. You might want the challenge to see how many words you come up that use the morpheme trans. These are just a few that came into my head. So really it's now thinking about what words you can think of that if you were to explore these, they'd really support your students' learning. And during this time, when we're not in school and when we're back at school, are there things that you or your department could be doing to get students thinking a bit more and exploring vocabulary? And as I said, it's just really trying to be a bit bold in lessons. Obviously, if you have able students, you could talk more about prefixes, stems and suffixes, but I tried to keep things simple. And just try to break the word down. If it all goes wrong, don't worry. And last thing, sorry, I just wanted to show you this, called the SEC model, which you might find a sort of logical way, something to apply as you're thinking about vocabulary. So it stands for select, explain, explore and consolidate. And consolidating's an important point that I need to make at the end. So you're selecting the words that might be difficult, explaining them in a student-friendly way. You could just type in etymology of a word or go to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. You might want to look at the word's origins. You might just want to stick to morphology and the breakdown. But then this is the really crucial thing, trying to bring that word back up lots of times so that you don't just look at it once. And it really goes into students' long-term memories. There's a link here if you fancy doing a bit more reading. And then there's some lovely people who are busy at the minute making some resource cards. Wendy in English, and I spoke to Emily this morning. Wendy's busy making lots of poetry revision cards and literature revision cards, and as part of those cards she's breaking down key terminology, and Emily has kindly said that she is very happy to offer support in making resources, looking at breaking down language and keywords for other departments. So do feel free to get in touch with her if you would like any help. All the very best, and miss you and look forward to seeing you all soon.